I think it's terrible. You want to know the truth? I think it's a disgrace. What's going on in this country, I think it's a disgrace. The memo was sent to Congress. It was declassified. Congress will do whatever they're going to do. But I think it's a disgrace what's happening in our country.
The president earlier today reacting to the stunning FISA memo, which was in fact declassified. Joining us now with reaction, North Carolina Congressman, Chairman of the House Freedom Caucus, Mark Meadows, Ohio Congressman, also Freedom Caucus member Jim Jordan. Congressman Meadows, let's start with you. I was wondering at times if people were overselling this. And in many ways, I think you undersold it in this respect. I think this is the biggest abuse of power, corruption scandal we've ever had, where you have one presidential candidate using phony Russian propaganda bought and paid for, and then you have the highest ranking people in the DOJ, in the FBI, using the powerful tools of intelligence to try and spy on and successfully spy on and hopefully derail an opposition party candidate and then undermining an incoming president. We've never seen this before, Congressman.
Well, we haven't, Sean, and you've been covering this for many, many months. In fact, when everybody was criticizing you about what you believed to be going on, today we now know that indeed it was going on. And, Sean, I can tell you probably the thing that concerns me the most is that this is the tip of the iceberg. We're already looking and reviewing other documents and other sources of information that would indicate other parts of collusion. And, you know, I can tell you there was no Russian collusion between this president and the Russians. But now what we're seeing is collusion actually did take place, but it was from the Hillary Clinton campaign and really trying to affect the election through this dossier that they paid for and was used to spy on American U.S. citizens.
Congressman Jordan, I watched you in committees, and there were times I'm going, finally somebody's saying it. I felt like I was hanging out here on a thread by myself some nights with some of my good partners and friends on the show. But it is worse than we thought. And I'm told that we might have a Grassley memo as early as next week that takes it yet to another level.
Remember what we learned today, Sean. Not once, not twice, not 3 times, but 4 times. The top people at the FBI took this salacious and unverified document, this dossier, to the secret court to get a secret warrant to spy on a fellow American. And guess what? They never told the court that the Democrat National Committee and the Clinton campaign paid for it. 4 opportunities to tell the truth to the court, and they didn't do it to spy on a fellow citizen. And they did that in the context of a presidential campaign. As Mark just said, this should never happen in this great country.
It never should. So Congressman Meadows, what does this mean? I would argue without all of this, what we are describing and talking about tonight, there is no special counsel Mueller. And I'm saying he needs to go yesterday because he never should have been appointed based on what we know tonight.
Well, what we do know is much of the information that actually called for a special prosecutor was tainted. And when we see that, you know, you have to look at the fruit of a tainted investigation. And it's very troubling. I believe that Special Counsel Mueller will come back and show that this president didn't collude with the Russians. But I think the underlying problem is there was a whole lot. Jim was just talking about it. You know, 4 times they went to a FISA court to spy on American citizens. But 3 of those times they did so after knowing that the very person who wrote the dossier was not telling the truth.
But they knew it was Hillary's in the beginning. And they never told the court the truth.
Without a doubt.
Omission. That omission is a lie. All right, Congressman Jordan, what should happen next? What's the next step in terms of if we want to right this tremendous injustice and constitutional violation?
The thing Mark and I and several other members called for 6 months ago, a second special counsel. We know Mueller can't expand his probe. He's inherently compromised on this. We know Jeff Sessions has recused himself. The only remedy, and I wish this wasn't the case. I'm not a big fan of special counsels, but I see no other remedy than a second special counsel. And I'd add one thing. Make sure they're not from the swamp. Make sure it's some retired federal judge from Iowa or Oklahoma or somewhere. Pick someone who come in and look at this entire situation so the American people can once again have confidence in the top people running these important agencies in our government.
Biggest abuse of power corruption case in our history. Thank you both for what you have done to help expose this.
Our next guest says what he's seen proves he's been right all along. The Russian collusion narrative is built on a, quote, rotten foundation. Republican Congressman Matt Gaetz serves on the House Judiciary Committee and joins us live. Congressman, great to see you tonight.
Good to see you, Shannon.
Okay, so let's talk about some of the reaction today. This is from Richard Haass, a tweet from him today. He says, the memo is largely devoted to discrediting the decision to monitor Carter Page because some percentage of the intelligence came from a source deemed to be prejudiced. The memo fails to discredit the substance of the case or deal with other justifications for monitoring Page. Are we only hearing part of the story in this memo?
Absolutely not, Shannon. You had a circumstance here where FISA warrants were reauthorized based on faulty information. Look, this dossier was so uncredible that they had to go and have this Yahoo News article planted by Christopher Steele to function as the validating information. Meanwhile, you've got the Democratic Party buying their way into the Justice Department. DNC money goes to a law firm, which then goes to Fusion GPS. Fusion GPS needs two things: dirt on Donald Trump and a way to get that into the intelligence bloodstream. So they hire Christopher Steele to make up the dirt, and then they hire Nellie Orr, the wife of Bruce Orr. And let's remember, Bruce Orr's charge at the Justice Department is to deal with counter-narcotics and drug enforcement, but somehow at the same time his wife is hired by Fusion GPS, he starts taking counterintelligence meeting and valeting this information paid for by the Democratic Party into the Justice Department and the FBI, and then ultimately it's so bogus that it's got to be validated by a Yahoo News article planted by Christopher Steele.
Okay, we don't yet know how much a percentage of the basis for the application for the warrant was based on the dossier. We know it was at least part of it. Would you support the declassification of the FISA application so we know more about that? Would you support voting for what the Democrats want to release in their memo, which they say paints the rest of the picture and gives context to everything?
Well, we do know what Andrew McCabe said, and he's no, talking head for the Republican Party. And Andrew McCabe said, but for this dossier, there never would have been a FISA memo.
Now, there are Democrats who are denying that tonight. They say that's not accurate. They were there. They've read or seen or heard the testimony themselves. They say that's not a fair characterization.
That is a verifiable fact. And so to answer your question, Shannon, I do support the release of any information the Democrats would like to provide, but they're all over the place. First, the Democrats voted against allowing members of Congress to see this information. They voted against even opening the investigation in the first place, saying it was just a distraction. I think all the American people can see now there is merit into looking into why you would have FISA warrants issued based on a political opposition research memo. For the first time in American history, this has happened. And so let's release their information. Let's have a public debate about it. But they've done something a little tricky, Shannon. The Democrats embedded into their memo sources and methods. And so as bad as some of us would want to release that immediately, it has to undergo the same process, just as Chairman Nunes said, so that we don't put people in danger. But their claims should already be deemed so uncredible. Remember just days ago when Democrats were saying, oh, if we release the Republican memo, there'll be all these sources and methods exposed. People will be in danger. Blood will be on the hands of Devin Nunes and the Republicans. I think the American people could see now how outrageous those claims were. This was information we needed out in the public.
Yeah, I've read the memo myself. People can do it. It's a quick read. They can decide whether or not there's anything in there. To me, it looks like something you'd read in a newspaper article or a first-year law class. I didn't see anything there that was so insightful or decisive or classified that it would live up to those claims. So that does raise some questions. I want to read a little bit of a letter from top Democrats in the House and Senate to the president today saying this: the decision to release a partisan and misleading memo over the objections of your own Federal Bureau of Investigation director and the Department of Justice was a transparent attempt to discredit the hardworking men and women of law enforcement who are investigating Russia's interference with our presidential election and that nation's ties to your campaign. Now, we saw that Speaker Ryan said just days ago he doesn't want Republicans connecting these two, that these are two separate issues. You shouldn't bring the Russia issue into this. Is it possible to see the two things, interpret them separately for what they are, or the Democrats right that this is simply about discrediting the Russia investigation?
Well, I don't entirely agree with the Speaker's characterization. I would say that this is far bigger than Russia or Donald Trump or even the Mueller probe. This is the first time in American history that politics has weaponized the FBI. And of course, the FBI and Department of Justice have been fighting to keep this information away from the American people. Look at what they did. They ultimately fire Christopher Steele. They remove the authorization for payment for him, and then they go and reauthorize wiretapping on American citizens based on information that they knew was false, based on an author of a dossier that they had already let go, and then they never told that to a FISA court. I mean, think about that, Shannon. They never told the FISA judge that they had to release Christopher Steele for not being credible. And this is not an adversarial court system where there's a defense attorney. This is a secret court with a prosecutor and a judge, and they made fundamental misrepresentations of fact and of omission to those judges. And ultimately, that's bigger than Mueller. That's bigger than Trump, and it's bigger than Russia. It's about the foundation of our democracy and the institutions we must trust to preserve it.
Yeah, and we're going to talk with a couple of attorneys coming up about some of those issues with the FISA court, how it works, and what could be done to kind of reaffirm or at least establish some credibility in the eyes of Americans who maybe don't understand all the nuances about it. We'll talk about that coming up. In the meantime, Congressman Matt Gaetz, thanks for joining us. Good to see you.
Thank you, Shannon. Go Knowles.